cool autumn morning when a group of friends set out on a road trip from Portland to Crater Lake. Alex, Jess, Mike, Liz, and Ben were crammed into Alex's old SUV, excited for a weekend getaway. The trunk was packed with camping gear and snacks, and the air was filled with the sounds of their favorite music and laughter. "Crater Lake, here we come," Alex cheered, pulling out of his driveway. Jess, in the passenger seat, was busy setting up the GPS. "I found a scenic route that takes us through Blackwood Forest," she said, smiling. "It's supposed to be really pretty this time of year." Mike, Liz, and Ben, sitting in the back, nodded in agreement. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow on the colorful leaves. It seemed like the perfect day for an adventure. As they drove deeper into the forest, the trees got taller and closer together, making the road feel narrower. The winding path seemed almost enchanted with its canopy of leaves. They passed the time telling jokes, sharing stories, and stopping now and then to take pictures or grab a snack from the trunk. By mid-afternoon, the weather started to change. The sky, which had been clear and blue, was now covered in thick clouds. A dense fog rolled in, making the forest look almost eerie. "We should probably find a place to stop for the night," Ben suggested, looking out the window at the creeping fog. Alex nodded, but just as he was about to respond, the SUV jolted and the engine sputtered. He managed to steer it to the side of the road before it died completely. "What's going on?" Liz asked, her voice edged with concern. "No idea," Alex replied, popping the hood and stepping out to take a look. The others followed, their breath visible in the cold air as they huddled around the front of the car. After a few minutes, Alex sighed. "Looks like the radiator's overheated. We'll need to let it cool down before we can do anything." As they stood by the car, Jess suddenly tensed. "Did you see that?" she whispered, pointing towards the dense trees. The others turned to look, but saw nothing. "See what?" Mike asked, frowning. "I thought I saw eyes," Jess said quietly. "Red eyes watching us." Everyone fell silent, straining to see through the fog. After a moment, Alex shook his head. "It's probably just your imagination." "Let's get back in the car. It's getting cold." They climbed back into the SUV, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. Minutes passed in silence, the earlier excitement replaced by a tense unease. Eventually, Alex tried the engine again, and to their relief, it started. They continued down the road, but the cheerful mood was gone. A few miles later, something dark and large suddenly leaped in front of the car. Alex swerved, barely avoiding it. The SUV skidded to a stop, leaving them all breathless and on edge. "What the hell was that?" Liz gasped, clutching her seat. "Did anyone see it?" Ben asked, his eyes wide with fear. Before anyone could answer, a terrifying scream echoed through the forest, making their blood run cold. Then, the red eyes appeared again, this time much closer, glowing ominously in the dark. The car engine sputtered and died once more, no matter how much Alex tried to start it. Panic set in as the red eyes seemed to multiply surrounding them. "We need to get out of here. Now!" Jess screamed. They jumped out of the car and ran down the road, the red eyes following. Ahead, they saw the faint glow of lights from a petrol station. They sprinted towards it, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Bursting through the door, they were greeted by an old attendant behind the counter. He looked up, startled by their frantic entrance. "What's going on?" he asked, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Something's out there," Alex panted. "We need help." The attendant's expression shifted from suspicion to a knowing fear. "You shouldn't be out here at this time of night," he said slowly. "Blackwood Forest isn't safe." As the friends tried to catch their breath, the lights in the station flickered. Outside, the red eyes were still visible, watching from the shadows. The attendant locked the door and pulled down the shutters. "We'll have to wait it out," he said grimly. Hours passed in tense silence. The friends huddled together as the attendant kept watch. The red eyes remained outside, unblinking, waiting. Eventually, the fog lifted and dawn began to break. The eyes vanished with the first light of day, leaving the friends shaken and exhausted. "We need to get out of here," Jess said, her voice trembling. The attendant nodded and opened the door, allowing them to leave. They cautiously made their way back to the SUV. It started without issue this time, and they wasted no time driving away from the cursed forest. As they neared the edge of Blackwood, relief washed over them. But just as they thought they were safe, a loud thump came from the roof of the car. Alex slammed on the brakes, and they saw a shadowy figure leap from the roof and disappear into the woods. In the rearview mirror, the red eyes glowed one last time before fading into the darkness. Traumatized, they sped away, vowing never to return to Blackwood Forest. But the memory of those eyes haunted them, a lingering reminder of the terror they had faced. Their road trip had turned into a nightmare, one they would never forget. 2 years later, Alex sat alone in his apartment, the glow of his laptop screen the only source of light in the dark room. He had never fully recovered from that night in Blackwood Forest. None of them had. The group had drifted apart, each friend dealing with the trauma in their own way. Jess had moved to a different city, Mike had taken up a job that required frequent travel, and Liz had thrown herself into her studies. Ben had changed the most. He had always been the jokester, the life of the party, but now he was withdrawn and paranoid, seeing red eyes in every shadow. Alex rubbed his temples, trying to focus on the work in front of him, but his mind kept drifting back to the forest, to the eyes. He hadn't told anyone, but he had started seeing them too. In his dreams and his peripheral vision, always just out of reach. He was tired, so tired, but he was afraid to sleep. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. He frowned, glancing at the clock. It was past midnight. Who could it be at this hour? He got up and opened the door cautiously. To his surprise, it was Jess. She looked exhausted, her eyes haunted. "Jess, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Alex. Can I come in?" He stepped aside to let her in, and she immediately went to the window, pulling the curtains shut. "What's going on?" Alex asked, a sense of dread creeping over him. "I've been seeing them too," Jess said, her voice shaking. "The eyes. They're following me. I thought I was losing my mind, but then I remembered. I remembered you saw them too." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. "You mean they're real?" Jess nodded. "I think they're coming for us, Alex." One by one, Alex and Jess decided they needed to find Mike, Liz, and Ben. They couldn't face whatever was haunting them alone. They made a pact to find the others and figure out how to stop the red eyes once and for all. Their first stop was Mike's apartment. When they arrived, the place was a mess. Papers and clothes were strewn everywhere, and it looked like Mike had left in a hurry. They found a note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in Mike's handwriting. "Gone to Blackwood. Need answers." "Blackwood? He went back?" Jess whispered, horror in her voice. "We have to follow him," Alex said grimly. "We need to find him before it's too late." Next, they headed to Liz's dorm. She was relieved to see them, having been plagued by the same nightmares and visions. She agreed to join them, determined to find a solution to their shared torment. Finding Ben was harder. He had become a recluse, paranoid and fearful. When they finally tracked him down, he was living in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town, surrounded by books on the occult and supernatural. "We have to go back to Blackwood," Alex said after they explained the situation. "We need to end this." Ben looked terrified but nodded in agreement. "If we're going to do this, we need to be prepared." The journey back to Blackwood Forest was tense. They traveled in Alex's SUV, the same vehicle that had broken down 2 years ago. The drive was filled with an eerie silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. As they entered the forest, the familiar feeling of dread washed over them. The trees seemed taller, darker, and the fog thicker than before. They parked the SUV at the edge of the forest and continued on foot, following the path they had taken years ago. It didn't take long for the red eyes to appear. This time they were ready. They had brought flashlights, weapons, and a plan. They would confront whatever was haunting them and end it, once and for all. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the red eyes multiplied, surrounding them. The friends stood back to back, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "What do you want?" Alex shouted into the void. A voice, cold and ancient, answered from the shadows. "You entered our domain. Now you must pay the price." "We're not afraid of you," Jess yelled, though her voice trembled. The red eyes moved closer, and the friends prepared for the worst. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and they were plunged into darkness. When they awoke, they were in a clearing, the red eyes gone. In front of them stood an old, decrepit house, its windows dark and foreboding. "This must be it," Ben said, his voice barely a whisper. "The source of the curse." They approached the house cautiously, the floorboards creaking under their weight. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The walls were lined with old photographs, each depicting scenes of horror and torment. "We need to find the source," Liz said, her voice determined. They searched the house, each room more disturbing than the last. In the basement, they found a hidden door, locked with an ancient padlock. Using a crowbar, Alex pried it open, revealing a dark staircase leading further down into the earth. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a room filled with strange symbols and artifacts. In the center of the room was an altar, upon which lay an old leather-bound book. "This must be it," Jess said, picking up the book. As she opened it, the air grew colder, and the red eyes appeared once more surrounding them. "You cannot stop us," the voice echoed through the chamber. "You are ours." "We have to destroy it," Ben said, his voice shaking. "It's the only way." They gathered around the book, each placing a hand on it. As they chanted a prayer of protection, the room began to shake, and the red eyes closed in. With a final desperate effort, they tore the book apart, the pages disintegrating into ash. The red eyes screamed in fury, and the friends were engulfed in darkness. When they awoke, they were back in the forest, the house gone. The red eyes were no longer visible, and the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. "We did it," Alex said, relief flooding his voice. "It's over." But as they made their way back to the SUV, a sense of unease lingered. The forest was silent, too silent. They climbed into the car and drove away, leaving Blackwood Forest behind. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The friends stayed in touch, bonded by their shared ordeal. But each of them felt a lingering sense of dread, a fear that the red eyes would return. One night, Alex received a frantic call from Jess. "Alex, they're back." The eyes. "They're in my house." Before he could respond, the line went dead. He rushed to her apartment, but it was too late. Jess was gone, and the red eyes were waiting for him. As he backed away in horror, he knew the nightmare was far from over. The red eyes had returned, and this time there would be no escape. Also, in the end, just don't forget, it wasn't just a puppy. So you better click that subscribe button